I think we can all agree that the third entry in the Iron Man franchise wasn't the movie that we all hoped it would be. And while rewatching this movie, I got very worked up about a lot of things. So let me tell you, I was this close to making a video titled Why Iron Man 3 was disappointing. However, I decided to obviously not make that video because I always try and look at the bright side of things, and not everything about this movie was terrible. So here are 3 things that I loved about this movie, but also 3 things that I hated. And because I first need to let off some steam, let's start with something that I hated about this movie. No logic and unrealistic behavior. And this is probably already the point that bothers me the most about this movie. Like, there are many other things to hate, and I'll get into those, but this one is just spread all throughout the movie, and there are so many logical errors and characters obviously behaving in an unrealistic way just because the script needs them to do that to get to point or outcome A or B. And I have some examples that I want to go through which I think perfectly illustrate this problem. So the first, probably strongest example is, at the beginning of the movie, Tony threatens a terrorist on live TV, then goes home and proceeds to put on his only prototype armor, and then gets attacked, but actually only sees the missiles flying towards his home once they're broadcasted on TV. Like, what the hell? I mean, I get why that's happening, and that's like this script aspect that I get that they want to, like, it's a typical thing that you want to depower your hero or give them some kind of disadvantage. So the filmmakers obviously wanted Iron Man to fight this scene, fight these helicopters in a prototype armor, because in his real normal armor it would have been way too easy. So that's like a typical thing, but you need to put the character in that situation in an organic, natural feeling way. And this is just obviously dumb. Like, if Tony Stark was a real person, which is what like cinema is all about, that you're trying to imagine that this is all real, it completely breaks the immersion for me, because a real person would never, especially as smart as Tony Stark, would never do something as dumb as that. Like, why is he wearing his prototype armor, the armor that can't fly yet, that doesn't have any missiles? And also, why does his home not have any other security features built in that defend or at least detect missiles flying towards his home? Like, it's just unrealistic and really illogical, which for me is not a lot of fun to watch. And also, not even mentioning the house party protocol. Like, obviously he could have already activated it in that moment and everything would have been fine, but I get that that wouldn't happen. So it's really the suit and not detecting the missiles. Like, what the hell? And then there's also other logical issues. Like, for example, when War Machine first encounters one of these glowy guys and the suit just instantly shuts off, so he can't defend himself. But then later, when a glowy guy touches Iron Man's suit, it doesn't shut off. He can just operate as normally. Which is again one of those things. I get that the War Machine armor shut down because the script needed the bad guys to get that War Machine armor, but then think of a different way to achieve that, because that's just a clear logical issue. Like, I love fantasy films, I love science fiction, but I always want to so that I can immerse myself in this fantasy world, when they establish rules or like A happens and B is the outcome, I want that to always be the outcome. And yeah, if something like that doesn't match up, it really bothers me. Another great example, in my opinion, is when in the final scene they put the president into the War Machine armor and the president is just hanging there, not able to do anything. But then when Rhodey puts on the exact same armor, he can suddenly operate it as normally, which is like, why couldn't the president use the armor when he was wearing it? And yeah, just to wrap things up, like, I could go on and on with these examples, but just one other little thing. Why does this guy suddenly breathe fire? Like, what an unnecessary scene also. Like, None of the other guys ever do it. I don't really get it in the context of what that operation or that experiment is doing to their genetics. Like, I don't get the setup for why he would be able to do that. And also, he uses it that one time, never again. And in that one moment, it wasn't even essential. He didn't even use it to defeat Rhodey in that moment. It was just, why? Just not have him do that, because it doesn't really fit. It feels kind of out of place. So yeah, I could go on and on. There are just many examples of this spread throughout the movie, and that really bothered me. So that's the first point that I hated about Iron Man 3. And now let's all calm back down again. As I said, not everything about this movie is terrible. And one thing that I really liked about this movie, or loved, is that Tony's dealing with PTSD. In the context of coming out of the Avengers movie where Tony was suddenly fighting aliens and almost died, I think it makes absolute sense that he would have some psychological challenges with an event like that. And I like that they, have a superhero deal with something like PTSD and anxiety attacks, which, feel realistic. And I like it when superheroes deal with something like that, that also, us normal, mortal, non-superhero people deal with. And I watched like several psychologists, that's what I wanted to say, react or give their take on this whole thing. And I love it when we have these psychological issues in superhero movies. So yeah, and I think they take it seriously enough, and he really deals with it for a while. Of course, he then overcomes it very instantly just by realizing, oh, he's a mechanic, he can fix things, which I get that needs to happen in like a superhero movie, because, you want that character arc, that low point, and then end on the high. But I like it that they had him deal with that, and really in a serious way, for a significant part of the movie. So well done, Marvel. And now back to something that I hated about this movie, and that's the bad Iron Man action scenes. And what do I mean by that? This is Iron Man 3. It's not Tony Stark 3, it's not The Mechanic 3. So when there is an action scene, I want like some Iron Man aspect to be involved in that. But then we have scenes where there's literally no Iron Man armor involved, no arc reactor. It's just Tony Stark, the Mechanic, fleeing from this glowy cop and this other glowy guy while being handcuffed and using like a microwave to have things explode, which is, it's a cool action scene, but in my opinion, or not for an Iron Man movie, or at least that's not what I want to see in an Iron Man movie. And then also later we have that scene where he goes to the hardware store and then comes up with these weapons, toys, thingies. And I get it, like he's a mechanic, there's a problem, he'll come up with a solution. But it's like, come on, this is Iron Man 3. Give me a cool Iron Man action scene. And that wasn't it, in my opinion, or for me. And now back to something that I loved about this movie, and now, quite surprisingly, what I also loved were the great Iron Man action scenes. So, wait a second, didn't you just say that there were bad Iron Man action scenes? So, now great? How does that all work? So, yeah. As I said, not everything about this movie was terrible. That's why I decided to go with this more nuanced, balanced approach of pros and cons, because while this movie had a lot of action scenes that I didn't like, it also had several that I really liked. So let's talk about them. So there are two Iron Man action scenes that really stood out to me in a positive way. And the first one is where Tony fights these bad guys where only like some parts of his suit arrive, like first just the hand and then the boot, and then he's fighting with that for a while, and then gradually more parts arrive. Like that, especially contrasted to what I just said about the bad Iron Man scenes. That's an amazing way, in my opinion, to make an Iron Man action scene, because it makes sense. Like in the story, it makes logical sense that this would happen. Like some of the parts got trapped in the garage and only some parts arrived and they're traveling at different speeds. Like it makes enough sense for me to accept that. And also that's a great action scene where you have Iron Man aspects involved, but you're still depowering your superhero to, make some usually not threatening action scenes a challenge for them. And that was, I think, a great way to go about it. So I really loved that scene. And the next Iron Man action scene that I really liked is the house party protocol at the end. So yes, logically, it would have made sense for him to just activate that at the beginning of the movie, but let's forget about that. We're on the positive side, talking about what I liked about this movie right now, so not talking about that. I really like the house party protocol as the end of the third movie, the end of the Iron Man trilogy. I like that as the climax, as the ending of having Tony Stark cast all his suits, everything he's been tinkering on, together into this amazing final battle. And yes, there are some flaws with this final battle. The suits seem like super weak, they're falling apart super easily, and the glowy guys shouldn't be that big of a challenge, but the whole house party protocol thing, I really like that, so thank you for that, Marvel. And now to the third aspect that I didn't like about this movie, and that's the Mandarin. Now, I'm sure there are many different opinions about the Mandarin in this movie. Some probably, especially the first time watching it, really hated it, but I'm also sure there are some that were like, what's all the fuss about? Like, it wasn't that bad, or actually it was kind of funny. So here's where I stand with it. Especially rewatching this, knowing what was going to happen, I could appreciate some of the humor in that scene. Like, I think the actor of the fake Mandarin, the Mandarin actor, so Trevor Slattery, I think he did an amazing job. He was like hilarious. So I could, not first time watching, but now rewatching it, I could appreciate that. And I don't think it's that terrible, because in the end, we still kind of get the Mandarin. There's just that little trap of, he doesn't look like that. He's actually, just Cillian Murphy? I don't know. Cillian? What was his name? Cillian. So that's why it wasn't that terrible in my opinion, but at the same time, it doesn't improve the story for me. Like, all that fuss, all that setup just for a joke, and it's like, just don't do that. I think the movie would have been better if the Mandarin would have actually been the Mandarin that we got at the beginning. And yes, we would have lost one joke, we would have lost some fun scenes with Trevor Slattery, but then we could have used all that extra time that we spent joking around with Trevor to give the character of Cillian, the real Mandarin, some more setup, because what we actually got as the Mandarin in form of Cillian felt kind of like a flat villain to me. Like, we didn't get that much time with him, and this whole thing was like the typical, okay, he wants to upgrade humanity, and this is like the next stage that he wants to force upon people, but then he's also kind of interested in Pepper, so that's kind of like his personal connection to Tony. I think it was kind of a weak villain that we got in the end. So yeah, not that happy with that whole switch up of the Mandarin, but also even if you ignore that switch up, I didn't really like the Mandarin as a villain in this movie. And now, enough hate, let's end this video on something positive. And I'm gonna be honest, I had to think like really long on what's the third thing that I really love about this movie. So what I, in the end, decided to go with was, I really liked how this movie integrated itself into the MCU, or especially following up the Avengers movie. It's one of those things that, especially revisiting the entire MCU, I just love to see, and I appreciate that so much. Like, this is what Marvel did so good, especially back then. Right now they're kind of struggling, but back then, making individual movies that work as individual movies, but also integrate themselves really nicely into the MCU. So I like that Thor was mentioned in this movie, that the whole, wormhole Avengers, Iron Man almost dying thing caused Tony Stark to have PTSD, and that people were behaving kind of differently, and that superheroes were now a thing, and that he was like famous and had many fans, and a lot of subtle lines, but I really like that integration. It makes it all feel like one big world, and yeah, I really like that about Iron Man 3. So those were some of my thoughts on Iron Man 3. So as I said, not everything about this movie is terrible, but of course, as a huge Marvel but also huge Iron Man fan, I am of course a bit disappointed with this movie. But gladly, it isn't the end of the character of Iron Man in the MCU. Like, that would have been a real shame. But gladly we get more of him in the future, and I can't wait to revisit those movies. So hopefully you'll join me for my MCU rewatch series, and let me know your thoughts on Iron Man 3 in the comments below. I'd love to know, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.